The fan film Spider-Man Lotus is getting a lot of attention, both good
Hey, that's pretty good.
and bad. The fan film is based on the comic books Spider-Man Blue and the Kid Who Collects Spider-Man.
So in the movie, Peter is dealing with the death of Gwen, and later meets a Spider-Man fan who is terminally ill.
And to summarize the drama, there's a range of allegations against the director and the actors, only some of which have been substantiated.
Now for the sake of this video, we'll be ignoring the controversy surrounding it and focus strictly on the film itself, to give a fair and honest review.
Right off the bat, we think it's only fair to place most of the credit and the blame on the director, as they also wrote and spearheaded the fan film.
Now we won't try to be overly harsh on this film, although we will be fair with it. I think that because the creator and the video is doing quite well with themselves and a lot better than we are, I don't think it's exactly punching down.
But before we get into our critique, he's Keto.
And he's Mio.
And we're gonna break this video up into sections, starting with the opening scene.
There are a lot of long opening shots in this, and that's about 40 seconds of just buildings.
There is a voiceover, but that's it. And then that's immediately followed by a CGI car that's just driving through the city, presumably rather fast, for 25 seconds.
So already off to a pretty slow start, I would say.
And the CGI car looks very much like a CGI car. With this amount of budget, I can see that being an issue because you're spending more of the money somewhere else, but it could look better. Also, nothing happens at the scene. The car's not causing peril, and people aren't diving out of the way. Nothing's really happening. It's just driving.
We then go to Spider-Man arriving finally. And Spring looks pretty good, I would say. Very Remy-esque.
These shots are actually really the best in the movie, and seriously, the VFX team must be suffering intense spinal injuries for carrying this entire fan film.
In person, though, the suit does look kind of soft and very homemade, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because Peter Parker makes his own suit and everything, so it kind of works in that way, but it is noticeable.
Then we get into the fight between Shocker and some of his goons, I guess, versus Spider-Man.
It's not good.
It could be better.
It's very goofy, and I guess you could call it lighthearted, and I think that works to a certain degree because it's kind of like, oh, it's all fun and goofy, but it's done in such a weird, poorly done way, it comes off as just kind of dumb.
Suit yourselves.
It's cheesy, but I say it's kind of passable. That said, the really lighthearted tone of this scene doesn't match the rest of the film at all. And we're pretty far into it, because this scene lasts for at least a few minutes. So we're into it enough that I think we should be getting an idea of what the tone for the movie should be, but we don't. Because immediately after this, we go into a scene that's rather dour and feeling.
By the way, when he arrives late to the whole movie thing, it's in the nighttime, so it's not apparently directly after the Shocker incident. It's a little bit confusing, but we'll see strange time stuff going on later in the film.
On to our next section, which is the performances.
Despite being the most controversial actor, possibly, in this film, Peter Parker is probably the best performer here.
He has some pretty good scenes. He has some areas of the movie where he conveys emotion pretty well. Some of the lines are a bit scuffed, but that's to be expected.
It has nothing to do with this. It's about Gwen. Do you realize that?
The actor of Harry Osborn, he seems pretty hairy-ish. I can see him as a Harry Osborn. But to be fair, some of his line delivery isn't great.
I thought we could get past our differences, and I thought we understood each other, but we don't.
Acting.
And there's a little boy in this movie, Tim. You know, kid actors. He's all right. He could have been much worse.
But all he really does is just read off the lines.
We have Gwen and Mary Jane. Both of them aren't great.
How'd your audition go? They've got no idea who they're missing out on.
No, they really don't.
Mary Jane especially is very inconsistent. Sometimes okay, but sometimes horrible.
Once again, I'm mostly blaming this on the director. There are some areas where she's okay, so she has the ability, but I'm pretty sure there should have been either more takes or the director should have tried to correct things a little bit. Yeah, so that's mostly on him. Also, the writing, because some of the dialogue is really clunky.
There's a lot of pauses in the dialogue.
I doubt he meant anything he said.
How do you know that?
You know,
I don't know if this was meant to affect the runtime of the film, but there is quite a bit of silence, I noticed.
And a lot of these lines are kind of on the nose, so they come off a little bit cheesy.
MJ, I've got nothing but time.
I just don't know.
Moving on to our next section, quality. The camera quality is good, very, very clean, very nice, good low light capabilities, but the cinematography really isn't anything special, and in some parts it's actually kind of distracting. I do have a little bit of experience in this kind of thing, so I know how difficult it can be to learn, but it's very basic coverage. Nothing is super creative about it, except for some of the CG transitions and stuff like that, and the equipment the equipment's good, but the equipment seems to be manned by people who don't know exactly what they're doing, and or the director isn't telling them what he wants.
What are you doing? I don't know what I'm doing!
So the costuming just seems very weird. I guess to mention one of the main points against the wardrobe would be Green Goblin. I think his mask isn't necessarily bad, but looks very much like a Halloween costume. Like, it takes the parts from the 2002 movie that's like a straight just mask that doesn't move at all, then goes like rubberish, like the old comic books. So I think they tried to mix the two and they just didn't work.
I would say either have the mouth not move at all or have it move all the way. Instead it just kind of flops a little bit.
Yeah, it's not great.
Back to cinematography. The lighting in this movie isn't horrible. Again, it's fairly basic, but there's some areas it's pretty good. But there's some scenes where it's actually pretty bad, especially during the action sequence when Spider-Man's fighting the Green Goblin. It's really hard to tell what's going on. It's just too dark.
Seriously, Spider-Man, turn off the dark.
I am having a little bit of difficulty though seeing where all the money went. With $100,000, I would expect it to be a little bit higher quality all throughout. I mean, the CGI scenes are good when Spider-Man's swinging and stuff like that through the city. That's pretty good. But then the fight scenes don't have any CGI at all except for the webs.
There's a part where he's just standing in the rain on a bridge, and all that's CGI, I believe. And I'm just confused why CGI there, but not in parts where it'd be more important.
I mean, there are parts of this movie that are fine overall, but I do feel that the whole movie would be of higher quality if it was shorter and they had to stretch the budget over the entire project.
Which goes on to our next point.
Bloat!
In no Spider-Verse does this movie need to be about 2 hours long, or rather an hour and 45, including 15 minutes of very slow moving credits. I feel like the credits were actually slow purposely to get it to 2 hours, if I had to guess.
The big thing to note about movies, especially these days with the attention span of people, is you gotta keep it snappy. These long shots of these buildings at the beginning is completely unnecessary. At least should accomplish more than just being shots of buildings. We don't learn anything, it isn't really valuable. I mean, it's pretty, but it's not necessary.
There's a lot of bloated scenes in this movie, like Peter crying over the videos. That's like, first my thought was, oh, well, this is unnecessary, but then I realized that's what basically the entire film's about. But that's like a long sequence of like 3 minutes. It's immediately followed by Harry walking through the city with some song playing, and that also lasts for about 3 minutes.
And by the way, Harry doesn't do anything. He just walks around looking sad.
He's on the pills, as he says.
Yeah, hooked on pills.
Yeah, this movie does not specify what those pills are, but they are pills. There's also a scene where Flash Thompson talks to Mary Jane about their problems and how sad they are about Gwen dying and everything, and then he immediately goes off on this tangent talking about Peter Parker and how Peter helped him out and how Peter's such a great guy, how tough his life has been, and then we circle back around and I have still no idea how that has to relate to anything they were talking about.
I can't be bothered to care.
I think the idea was Peter's such a great guy, he didn't mean what he said, but that could have been said in so few words.
Repetition. There's a lot of crying and being sad. That's what this movie's about. That's the main purpose of this movie, for people to cry and be sad. Repetition. Repetition.
The opening has a bunch of comic book like pages and everything, which I think is original artwork, which is pretty cool. I enjoyed that. It kind of is a good economical way of telling the story of how Spider-Man fought Green Goblin and Gwen Stacy died and everything.
Yeah.
And then immediately afterwards there's a news report,
which literally tells us the exact same thing that we just learned from the opening.
And it's like, alright, fine, I guess for those people who maybe don't know, sure. But then later on in the movie, we have the flashback to Gwen dying, which now we can literally see. It's in black and white for some reason, but then we cut out of black and white to another part of the flashback where we see him fight the Goblin and Norman Osborn die.
So we're just learning it all over again.
That's 3 times we've been told. Quick detour, let's talk about the Goblin fight real quick. It's the next action scene after the Shocker one, and it's the last one. There's only 2.
Choreography is not good, although maybe I'm being too harsh because I can't tell what's actually going on to probably be able to judge.
It looks like Spider-Man's winning, but then we have sort of a time skip, and then Spider-Man's losing. Maybe they should have had a section where it was a bit more even, or Spider-Man was losing and then we cut further on, but instead we just see him and now he's all beat up and blooded and everything. It's like, oh bro, you were just winning.
Goblin then proceeds to just stand there taunting Peter, saying, it's your fault.
Tangled web you've weaved. But that wasn't me, Peter. That was you.
Didn't you know? It's your fault.
Destroying everything around you.
By the way, I believe Peter's been blaming himself for this entire movie, and this is just more affirmation. This is Peter's fault.
And I think he says it about 2 or 3 different ways.
That was all you.
And then he just stands there as Peter struggles to his feet, limps over, and then just starts hitting him. He throws up no defense. I guess he'd use all his power to bring Peter down to this point, and then he just couldn't do anything.
Oh no! And I have power!
Another part of repetition is Peter visiting Tim's room and just looking around. We can see all the memorabilia on the walls, and the comic books, and the posters, and the toys. By the way, how does this all exist in universe?
That's what also confuses me. I think the reason that there's so much looking at the artwork is because he had a bunch of fans like make the artwork for the film. So I think he was supposed to like showcase all of it, maybe?
You know, that's neat, that's fine. But it happens 2 or 3 times?
In separate occasions.
He just looks around and he's realized how inspired he is and how inspiring he is to this child, and there's music and it's emotional, but we do it one too many times. Again, with the dialogue, there's also some bloat there, with long pauses in between lines, and overall the dialogue is kind of clunky. On to the next section, continuity. There are some big issues with continuity in this film. Here are some examples here.
Gwen, I tried to... You collected all of this?
It's every newspaper that the Daily...
I really shouldn't be here.
None of this makes sense.
Also, the boy says that he is 10 years old. However, on the gravestone, he died when he was 8. So for some reason, he just decided to lie to Spider-Man.
No idea why. Maybe he was just rounding up. Yes, there's some areas where there's clearly some oversight. Like, are these scenes going on at the same time and during the same night? Why is it raining versus not raining? Lots of questions. On to our final section, the ending of the movie.
The ending basically defeats itself, I would say.
I see what they were going for. Spider-Man is a hero. He has to answer the call. But it just doesn't work, because after all this time, we just established that he and his friends are going to stick together through this hard time. They're going to be there for each other, and he's going to stop blowing them off and ignoring them and everything. They're going to get back together. They're going to be friends.
And then when they have the opportunity to go to a party for Flash going off the military, Peter walks up, late of course, and he looks in the window, but then he hears police sirens, which I'm sure is very common in New York, by the way. And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna abandon my friends just one more time. And he leaves and becomes Spider-Man. And I don't understand what the message was.
Mary Jane and Harry had just arrived, by the way, so clearly he can't be that late, unless there's like another time skip, in which case continuity issues again. But he immediately runs off. He like throws off his tie, and it looks like he's gonna take off his suit and I guess leave it behind. But you know, you could kind of carefully set that somewhere, take care of business, and come back.
Plus also, it feels like abandonment because Mary Jane and Flash presumably don't know that he's Spider-Man.
Also, it looked like, I can't tell based on the shot here, but it looks like Mary Jane is actually looking at him, so she might have seen him in the window. So from her perspective, she just sees Peter run up late, and then he looks to the left, looks to the right, and then just takes off.
Besides that, as we mentioned, the credits are too long, and yeah, this movie is finally over.
In conclusion, we oftentimes rate movies. I would say this one I would give a score of 2 out of 10.
There's not much that I liked, and there's a lot that I didn't like. I want to be as honest as possible.
Could have been much better.
I'm not saying like versus other, big production movies. I'm saying as a film in its own right, this movie is not good.
And you could say, oh, it's just because you like the action sequences, you just want Spider-Man fighting people. No! I'm fine with all the stuff, all the emotional things and the character development, but it didn't have to be this long, it didn't have to be this boring, and it didn't have to be so bad.
With a budget of $100,000, I think they could have just made it into maybe a 30-minute film, and I think it would have been really, really good.
Instead, they decided to just kind of stretch it out, which I get it. It's tempting when you have all that money and you can do it. The question is, should you? And if they really could have, they should have come up with another story rather than taking this one and stretching it. But, congrats to everyone involved. Good job. You did complete a rather ambitious project.
Yes, and this is no hate to anyone in particular, because we're ignoring the controversy. But, what do you think?
If you've seen it, let us know in the comments down below, or based on our description, let us know what you think. And, feel free to check out Lotus if you really want to. If you don't, understandable.
We're not really sure if we're going to make another video talking about the controversy or not, but for now, this is just the video.
Go click this video over here if you're interested in another one.
And until then, he's Mio.
And he's Keto.
And we hope you have a blessed day.
Bye!
You thought I was asleep, didn't you? Acting. Good night.